They never called me by my name. In 14 years of service to the Golden Throne, across 11 campaigns and 6 separate war zones, I cannot recall a single instance where any member of the 47th Kessler Fusiliers addressed me as Marcus Varro. To them, I was the goat or beast, or simply it when they thought I could not hear them. Sometimes they did not care whether I heard. Most of the time, I think they preferred that I did. There is a particular satisfaction, I came to learn, that humans take in reminding something that it does not belong. It costs them nothing to speak the cruelty aloud, and it costs me everything to pretend I did not hear it. I am writing this in what passes for a Medicaid bay on a troop transport, bound for a world whose name I have already forgotten. The journey will take 6 weeks. I do not believe I will survive to see its end, and so I am setting down these words for whatever imperial scribe might one day catalogue them in some forgotten archive. Not because I believe anyone will read them, not because I think my story matters. I write because I want there to be a record, however small, that I existed, that I served, that I was loyal even when loyalty was never returned. I have earned no other legacy. This confession is all that remains of a life spent trying to prove that a thing born wrong could still be good. The medal they took from me would have been the other legacy. A medallion crimson, awarded for the action at Heltoff Gorge, where I pulled 3 wounded men from a burning chimera while enemy fire turned the air into screaming metal. The citation was read aloud at the regimental assembly. My name was not mentioned. The medal was pinned to my chest by Colonel Vance himself, and I remember the way he held his breath as he leaned close, the way his nostrils flared and his jaw tightened. He smelled of amasec and old sweat and something sour underneath, something that I would later recognize as disgust that had curdled into physical revulsion. He did not look at my face. No one ever looked at my face. When the ceremony ended, Commissar Eldridge took me aside and informed me that the medal would be held for safekeeping in the regimental archives. For my own protection, he said. There had been complaints. Some of the men felt it was inappropriate for someone of my nature to wear the Emperor's honors openly. It might damage morale. It might suggest that abhumans were equal to the men they served beside. The Commissar's voice was gentle, almost apologetic, as if he were explaining something obvious to a slow child. I never saw the medal again. I want you to understand what I am before I go further. The Imperium has a name for those like me, Homo sapiens variatus, subspecies beastman. In the endless taxonomies of the administratum, we occupy a gray zone between acceptable deviation and heretical mutation. Some beastman strains are sanctioned for military service, others are culled at birth. The difference, as far as I can determine, depends entirely on which sector you are born in and how badly the local tithe collectors need bodies for the guard. I was born on Keswick Tertius, a hive world in the subsector Primus, where the manufacturums pump poison into the air and the water and the soil until everything that grows there grows wrong. 1 child in 30 is born with some visible mark of that wrongness. Most are drowned within hours of their birth. I was not drowned because my father worked in the Administratum Census Bureau and knew how to falsify the records that would have condemned me. He gave me to the guard recruitment centers when I was 14, before anyone could ask too many questions about the boy with the horns. They are small horns as these things go, 2 curved protrusions that sweep back from my temples, no longer than my thumbs, dark and ridged like something carved from old bone. My face is heavier than a normal man's, the brow thicker, the jaw wider, with a coarse stubble that grows faster than any razor can manage. My eyes are wrong, set too wide, and there is a quality to them in certain lights that makes people uncomfortable. Gold yellow with pupils that narrow to slits when I am angry or afraid. When I was young, I tried to file down the horns until they bled. The bleeding never stopped them from growing back. Now I keep them covered with a modified helmet liner, and I wear the rebreather mask whenever regulations permit, and I keep my head down, and I do not speak unless spoken to, and I try to make myself small even though I am not small at all. The muscles in my legs are wrong too, arranged in ways that let me run faster and jump higher than baseline humans. My sense of smell is so sharp that I can taste the fear in a man's sweat from across a room. These gifts have saved my life more times than I can count, These same gifts mark me as something less than human. The first time I killed an enemy of the Imperium, I was 17 years old and shaking so badly that I could barely hold my Lazrafal level. It was during the clearance of Hadley's Reach, a minor action against a secessionist militia that the official histories have probably forgotten. We were advancing through a burned-out township when the ambush hit, and I found myself face to face with a man who was trying to gut me with a bayonet. I shot him in the chest from a distance of perhaps 3 feet, and I watched the light leave his eyes, and I felt something inside me shift into a new configuration that has never shifted back. Afterward, when the shooting stopped, Corporal Webb came to where I was standing over the body and clapped me on the shoulder. "Well done, Goat," he said, almost like a real soldier. He meant it as praise. I understood even then that it was the kindest thing anyone in the regiment had ever said to me. Those early years taught me the rules of survival that would govern the rest of my service. Never volunteer for anything. Never complain, because complaints from my mouth were insubordination, while complaints from human mouths were simply griping. Never be first to eat or drink or rest, no matter how hungry or thirsty or tired. Never make eye contact for more than a second. Never ever respond to the insults, because response was aggression and aggression was grounds for disciplinary action. Above all, never let them see you bleed, because weakness in something like me was confirmation of fundamental inferiority, while weakness in a man was simply being human. I followed these rules with fanatical precision. I made myself useful. I learned to anticipate what the officers wanted before they knew they wanted it. I volunteered for the dangerous assignments that no one else wanted: scouting, tunnel clearance, rear guard actions. In combat, I killed efficiently and without hesitation, and I dragged wounded men to safety whenever the opportunity arose, and I never once asked for recognition or reward. I believed, with the desperate faith of a child praying for acceptance, that if I was good enough for long enough, they would eventually have to see me as one of them. There was a sergeant once who almost made me believe it was possible. Thomas Donnelly, a career guardsman from the industrial suburbs of Kessler Prime, with 20 years of service and a face like eroded stone. He joined the company during the Calix campaign, transferred in from a shattered regiment that had been folded into ours after losing 80% of its strength in some disaster that no one wanted to discuss. From the first day he arrived, he was different. He called me Private instead of Goat. He assigned me to fire teams based on tactical sense rather than using me as a disposable asset. When the others made their jokes at my expense, he did not laugh, and sometimes he would say enough with a quiet authority that made the joking stop. I cannot adequately describe what this meant to me. After 7 years of serving in a regiment that barely acknowledged my existence, here was a man who treated me as if I were simply another soldier under his command. I allowed myself to hope. That was my mistake. I see that now with the clarity that only comes when you are dying and there is nothing left to lose by telling the truth. I allowed myself to believe that Sergeant Donnelly's decency was genuine, that it represented some possibility of acceptance that my previous experience had simply failed to discover. I fought harder for him than I had ever fought for anyone. During the assault on the Calix Bastion, when las fire and stub rounds were churning the air into chaos and half our platoon was pinned in a killing ground, without cover, I charged a fortified position alone so that my squad could advance. I took 2 rounds in the shoulder and 1 in the thigh, and I killed 11 men with bayonet and rifle butt before the position was silenced, and when it was over I collapsed in a heap of spent casings and enemy dead, and waited for the Medicae who never came. Donnelly found me there 3 hours later, half dead from blood loss, and he carried me on his own back to the aid station. On the way, delirious with pain and shock, I told him things I had never told anyone. About my father, about the falsified records, about the dreams I had as a child, before I understood what I was, when I still believed I might grow up to be something other than a monster. He listened without speaking. When I was done, he set me down outside the Medicae tent and went to fetch a chirurgeon. I did not see him again for 2 weeks, during which time I was confined to the recovery ward and forbidden visitors. When I finally returned to active duty, everything had changed. The sergeant still called me private. He still assigned me to fire teams. But there was something different in his eyes when he looked at me, a quality of assessment that I had not noticed before, and the others were worse. The jokes had stopped, replaced by a watchful silence that felt somehow more hostile than open mockery. At night, I would wake to find soldiers standing at the foot of my bunk, staring down at me in the darkness without speaking. When I reported this to the company commander, I was told that I must be imagining things. When I asked for a transfer, I was told that transfers were not available for personnel in my classification. When I stopped sleeping, no one seemed to notice or care. The report was filed 3 months after Calix. I know this because I saw it once, briefly, on a data slate that a careless adjutant left unattended in the command tent. The document was titled Preliminary Assessment of Subject Varo, Marcus, Homo Variatus Classification, and it ran to 19 pages of dense script that I did not have time to read in full. What I did read made my blood run cold. Observations of aberrant behavior, notes on animalistic aggression and pack-bonding instincts, psychological evaluations that I had never participated in, citing interviews I had never given. And at the bottom, in Sergeant Donnelly's unmistakable handwriting, a recommendation that the subject be transferred to a penal legion at the earliest opportunity, as continued service in a standard regiment posed unacceptable risks to unit cohesion and baseline human morale. The things I had told him in my delirium were there too, reframed as evidence of deception and potential heretical association. My father's falsified records, my childhood dreams, everything I had confessed in a moment of desperate trust, weaponized against me. I should have run. I should have deserted that night, taken my chances in the wilderness beyond the camp perimeter, let them hunt me down like the animal they already believed I was. Instead, I did what I had always done. I followed orders. I maintained discipline. I told myself that the report might never be acted upon, that somewhere in the grinding bureaucracy of the administratum it would be lost or misfiled or simply forgotten in the endless avalanche of paperwork that buried every military operation. I could not bring myself to believe that Donnelly had betrayed me. I kept looking for alternative explanations. Perhaps someone had forged his signature. Perhaps the report was a test of my loyalty, and if I remained steadfast, I would be vindicated. Perhaps none of it was real at all, a fever dream born from the lingering effects of my wounds. The mind will construct any fantasy to avoid accepting the simple truth that you have been used. The war on Calix ended in a Pyrrhic victory that the propagandists declared a magnificent triumph. Our regiment was rotated off-world for refit and recuperation, which meant 6 months in a transit camp while the Munitorum decided where to send us next. During this time, I was summoned to 3 separate hearings, each conducted by different officers, each asking the same questions about my service record, my loyalty, my thoughts about the Emperor, my relationship with the other members of my unit. I answered every question with perfect orthodoxy. I quoted scripture. I recited the litanies of faith until my throat was raw. I submitted to physical examinations that left me bleeding from a dozen small wounds where the chirurgeons had taken samples of my anomalous tissues. At the end of the 3rd hearing, I was informed that no action would be taken against me at this time, but that my case would remain under review pending further observation. The officer who delivered this verdict would not meet my eyes. He kept his hand near his sidearm throughout the conversation, as if he expected me to lunge at him at any moment. I want to tell you about the men I saved, not because I expect gratitude, not because I want credit, but because I need you to understand that my loyalty was not an abstraction. It was embodied in specific acts, in moments where I chose to risk my life for men who would not have done the same for me. Private Jensen was the first on Hadley's Reach, when a grenade landed in our foxhole and I threw myself on top of him without thinking. The blast caught my back instead of his face. He never thanked me. He requested a transfer to another squad the following week, citing personal incompatibility. Corporal Webb was the second during the Calix advance when I pulled him from a collapsed trench before the earth could crush him. He spat in my face when I set him down. and later told anyone who would listen that a real soldier had saved him, and that the goat had just been nearby when it happened. Private Reyes was the third and fourth and fifth, because I saved his life 3 separate times across 2 campaigns, and he repaid me by starting a rumor that I was a chaos mutant who should be reported to the commissariat. The rumor almost worked. I spent a week in the stockade before an investigation cleared me of any taint. Private Cole was the last, and his story is the one that finally broke something in me that had been bending for a long time. We were fighting on Dreth Secundus, a mining world at the edge of the sector, where the enemy was some manner of Xenos that the briefings called the Pale Host. I did not understand what they were, and I did not particularly care. They died when you shot them, which was all that mattered. Our company was tasked with clearing a series of tunnel networks beneath the primary mining complex, and it was the worst kind of work: close quarters, poor visibility, every shadow potentially hiding something that wanted to eat you. Private Cole was a replacement, fresh from the training camps on Kessler, maybe 19 years old and so obviously terrified that it hurt to look at him. He had been assigned to my squad as a punishment, though whether the punishment was meant for him or for me was unclear. The first time he saw my face without the mask, he screamed. The squad leader had to physically restrain him. Afterward, he refused to walk within 10 meters of me, and he flinched every time I spoke. In the tunnels, the Xenos came from above. They dropped from crevices in the ceiling, pale and chittering and armed with natural weapons that cut through flak armor like cloth. Cole was separated from the main group during the first engagement, dragged away into a side passage while the rest of us were occupied with the swarm. I heard him screaming. I heard the others decide to leave him. Acceptable losses, the squad leader said. We cannot pursue without risking the entire unit. This was tactically correct. It was also a death sentence for a 19-year-old boy whose only crime was being unlucky. I went after him anyway, alone, because I could not stand the sound of his screams and because some part of me still believed that this was what being a good soldier meant. I found him in a chamber deep beneath the surface, cocooned in some kind of organic resin, with 3 of the creatures crouched over him like predators savoring their prey. I killed them all. It took less than a minute. When I cut Cole free, he was still conscious, and he looked up at me with an expression I had never seen directed at me before. Not fear, not disgust, something almost like gratitude. He could not walk on his own, so I carried him. The journey back to the main tunnels took 4 hours, during which time I fought off 6 more attacks and lost most of the blood in my body through a wound in my side that I did not have time to bandage properly. When we finally emerged into the light of the mining complex, I collapsed face first into the dirt, and the last thing I heard before unconsciousness took me was Cole telling someone that I had saved his life. I woke 3 days later in the Medicaid Bay. The first thing I saw was Cole sitting beside my cot, which surprised me so much that I thought I must still be dreaming. He looked different, older somehow, as if the hours in the tunnel had aged him years. When he saw my eyes open, he leaned close and spoke in a low voice so that the orderlies would not hear. "I need to tell you something," he said. "While you were unconscious, the sergeant came to see me, the other sergeant, not Donnelly, Sergeant Reese. He told me that what happened in the tunnels needs to stay in the tunnels. He told me that if anyone asks, a fire team pulled me out, not you. He said it would be better for everyone if your involvement was not mentioned. He said that you would understand, that this was how things worked." I saw the shame in Cole's face as he spoke. I saw the apology he was trying to form. But I also saw that he was not going to contradict the sergeant's story. He was not going to tell the truth. He was going to let them erase me from his survival, the same way they had erased me from every other act of service I had ever performed. I could not blame him. He was 19 years old and surrounded by men who had made it clear that association with me was a liability. He had a career to think about, a future that did not include being known as the soldier whose life was saved by a goat. I told him it was fine. I told him I understood. I told him to go, and he went, and I did not see him again until the boarding action 3 years later that would be the last engagement of my service. The years between Dreth and the boarding action blur together in my memory like a fever dream of identical miseries. We fought on a dozen worlds. We killed enemies I could not name and defended positions I could not locate on any map. I was promoted to corporal, then busted back to private for an infraction that was never clearly explained. I was assigned to increasingly dangerous duties: point man on patrols, first through the breach on assaults, forward observer during artillery bombardments. Each assignment was designed to kill me. I understood this, the officers understood this, everyone understood this, and no one said it aloud, because saying it aloud would have made it murder, instead of simply the natural wastage of war. I survived anyway. I survived because I was faster and stronger and harder to kill than the enemies the Imperium sent me against. I survived because some stubborn part of me refused to give them the satisfaction of dying quietly. Every morning I woke up was a rebuke to everyone who wanted me gone. Every enemy I killed was proof that I deserved to exist. But I was getting tired. I could feel it in my bones, in my joints, in the places where old wounds had healed wrong and left behind perpetual aches that no amount of painkillers could silence. I was getting slow. My reactions were still faster than any baseline humans, but they were slower than they had been, and in combat that kind of decline is the difference between life and death. More than that, I was getting tired of caring. The hope I had nurtured for so long, the desperate belief that loyalty would eventually be rewarded, had finally begun to die. I stopped volunteering for dangerous assignments. I stopped trying to prove myself. I did my duty and nothing more, and I waited for the end that I knew was coming. The end came on a ship called the Righteous Burden, a troop transport carrying what remained of our regiment to yet another war zone. We were 3 weeks into the voyage when the attack happened. I do not know what hit us, Xenos raiders perhaps, or pirates, or something worse that the briefings never mentioned. The first I knew of it was the alarm klaxons and the shuddering impact of weapons fire against the hull, and then the sergeant was shouting for everyone to grab their weapons and prepare to repel boarders. I found myself in a corridor near the starboard hangars, part of an ad hoc defensive line thrown together from whoever happened to be nearby. Cole was there, I noticed. Still alive after all these years, promoted to corporal now, looking at me with an expression I could not read. Donnelly was there too, though he was a lieutenant now, and technically should not have been in the fighting at all. He had positioned himself at the center of our line, bolt pistol in hand, shouting orders that no one could hear over the din of combat. They came through the hull breach like a tide of shadows, and I realized almost immediately that we could not hold. There were too many of them and too few of us, and the corridor was too wide for effective defense. Men were dying around me, their screams swallowed by the cacophony of lass fire and alien shrieks, and I saw with terrible clarity that the line was about to break. If it broke, the enemy would pour into the ship's interior, and everyone aboard would die. Thousands of soldiers, thousands of crew, all of them depending on a handful of men in a corridor to hold a position that could not be held. I do not remember deciding to charge. I remember the moment before and the moment after, but the decision itself is lost somewhere in the space between. One instant I was firing from cover, and the next I was running directly into the enemy mass, my las rifle forgotten, a combat knife in each hand, my vision narrowed to a tunnel of red and gold. I killed the first one before it could react. I killed the second as it turned to face me. I killed the third and the fourth and the fifth in a blur of motion that my body seemed to execute without any input from my conscious mind. The corridor became a charnel house. I was wounded, I knew, though I could not tell how many times or how badly. The blood on my hands was not all my own. The screaming I heard might have been the enemy or might have been myself. It did not matter. Nothing mattered except the next kill, and the next, until finally there were no more enemies to kill, and I was standing alone in a heap of alien corpses with my lungs burning and my heart hammering against my ribs like something trying to escape. The silence afterward was worse than the fighting. I turned and saw the defensive line still intact behind me. I saw the men staring at me with expressions I did not have the energy to interpret. I saw Cole, still alive, his weapon half raised as if he was not sure whether to shoot me or salute me. I saw Donnelly, the lieutenant now, watching me with that same assessing look he had worn since Calix, and I saw, in the distance, a commissar pushing through the crowd with his bolt pistol drawn and his face set in an expression of grim determination. I knew what was going to happen before it happened. I had always known, I think, somewhere in the back of my mind where the truths we cannot face are stored. The charge I had made was undeniably heroic. It had saved the ship, it had saved the regiment, but it had also been witnessed by hundreds of soldiers, and those soldiers had seen something that the Imperium could not allow to be remembered. They had seen a beastman fight with more courage and ferocity than any human present. They had seen an abhuman save their lives while they cowered behind cover. They had seen proof that something born wrong could still be good, and that proof was dangerous. It threatened the narratives that justified their cruelty. It suggested that perhaps they had been wrong about me all along, and people do not forgive you for making them confront the possibility that they have been monsters. The commissar reached me as I was trying to stand. My legs would not cooperate. Too much blood lost, too many wounds accumulated over too many years. He looked down at me with something almost like pity, and then he raised his bolt pistol to my head. "For dereliction of duty," he said, his voice flat and formal. "For abandoning your position during combat. For conduct unbecoming a soldier of the Emperor. The charges were lies. Everyone watching knew they were lies. No one said anything, no one moved to stop him." I looked past the commissar, past the crowd of silent soldiers, and I found Cole's face in the mass of bodies. He was crying. I could smell the salt of his tears even at this distance, even through the blood and smoke and death that filled the corridor. He opened his mouth as if to speak, and I saw him hesitate, and I saw him close his mouth again without saying anything. He looked away. They all looked away. The bolt pistol clicked as the commissar disengaged the safety. I thought about begging. I thought about pleading my case, citing the lives I had saved, the enemies I had killed, the 14 years of loyal service I had given to an Imperium that had never wanted me. I thought about my father, who had broken the law to give me a chance at life. I thought about the medal they took from me. I thought about all the small kindnesses I had never received and the larger cruelties I had learned to endure. And then I thought about Donnelly, about the report he had filed, about the way he had listened to my confession and used it against me, and I realized that begging would accomplish nothing. They had decided what I was before I was ever born. Nothing I did or said would ever change their minds. The only choice left to me was how I faced the end. "My name is Marcus Varro," I said. I wanted to say it out loud at least once to someone, even if that someone was the man about to kill me. I served 14 years in the Imperial Guard. I was a good soldier. The commissar's expression did not change. He did not acknowledge my words. Perhaps he did not even hear them over the ringing in his ears from the battle. His finger tightened on the trigger, and then Donnelly spoke. "Wait," he said, pushing through the crowd. "Wait." There was something in his voice that I had never heard before, something that sounded almost like doubt. He reached the commissar and put a hand on the man's arm, and for a long moment the two officers stared at each other in silence. "What?" the commissar said. "You have something to say, Lieutenant?" Donnelly's jaw worked. I could smell the conflict on him, the fear and the guilt and something else, something I did not recognize until much later, when I had time to examine the memory properly. He smelled like a man standing at a crossroads, trying to decide which direction would let him live with himself. "He's dying anyway," Donnelly said finally. "The wounds, look at him. He won't survive the hour. You don't need to waste a bolt round. Let him bleed out. It's more economical." The commissar considered this. He looked at me, at the pool of blood spreading beneath my body, at the wounds that I had accumulated over the course of the battle. Then he nodded. "Fine," he said. "Post a guard. Make sure he doesn't try to crawl off somewhere and die unsupervised. We'll need the body for documentation." He holstered his pistol and walked away without another word. The crowd dispersed. Donnelly lingered for a moment, looking down at me with an expression I still cannot fully interpret, and then he too was gone, and I was alone with a single bored soldier standing watch over my dying body. I should have died. The medicae who eventually treated me said it was impossible that I survived, that no human body could lose that much blood and keep functioning, that my physiology must include some abhuman adaptation, they had never documented. They were probably right. I am a thing born wrong, after all. Perhaps being wrong included being harder to kill than anything natural. I woke in this Medicaid bay 3 days after the battle, strapped to a cot, with restraints on my wrists and ankles, and a guard posted outside the door. The first thing they told me was that I was being transferred, not to a penal legion as I had expected, but to something worse. There are units in the Imperial Guard that do not officially exist, they said. Units composed entirely of those like me, of abhumans and mutants, and the other broken things that the Imperium finds useful but cannot acknowledge. These units are sent to the places no one else is sent. They fight the enemies no one else will fight. They do not receive medals or recognition or even the basic dignity of a proper uniform. They die in darkness on worlds that have no names, and when they are gone, all records of their existence are erased. This is where I am being sent. This is where I will end. The transport will arrive at our destination in 5 weeks. I have been told that I will be put into combat immediately upon arrival, assuming my wounds heal sufficiently to allow me to hold a weapon. I do not expect to survive my first engagement. I am not sure I want to survive. The thing that kept me fighting all these years, the stubborn hope that loyalty might eventually be rewarded, is finally dead. I killed it myself in the moment I realized that Donnelly's intervention was not mercy but convenience. He did not want to waste resources. He did not want the paperwork that came with a formal execution. He did not want to remember that he had once listened to my confessions and used them against me. Letting me bleed to death was cleaner, easier, more economical. I am writing this because I need there to be a record, not for myself. I do not expect justice or vindication, or even the simple acknowledgement that I was once alive. I am writing this for the next Marcus Varro, the next beastman born on some poisoned world who makes the mistake of believing that service can earn acceptance. I am writing to tell that creature, whoever they are, wherever they are, it will not work. They will use you. They will spend your blood and your loyalty and your desperate need to belong, and when you are empty, they will discard you without a second thought. The Imperium does not reward devotion. The Imperium does not see you as human. The Imperium sees you as a resource to be exploited and a threat to be contained, and no amount of heroism will ever change its mind. I wonder sometimes what would have happened if I had been born different. If I had emerged from my mother's womb without the horns, without the wrong eyes, without the muscles that let me run faster than anyone. Would I have been happy? Would I have found a place where I belonged, or would I have discovered some other reason to be hated? Some other mark of difference that set me apart from the masses of humanity? I do not know. I will never know. The question is meaningless now. Private Cole came to see me yesterday. I do not know how he got past the guard. Perhaps he bribed someone. Perhaps no one cared enough to stop him. He stood beside my cot for a long time without speaking, and I could smell the guilt on him, so thick and heavy that it almost masked the fear. Finally he said, "I'm sorry." 2 words, nothing else. No explanation, no justification, no attempt to excuse what he had done or failed to do. Just, "I'm sorry," whispered in a voice so quiet I almost did not hear it. I told him it was fine. I told him I understood. I told him to go, and he went, and I do not expect to see him again. But I have been thinking about those 2 words ever since. I'm sorry. It is not enough. Nothing he could say would be enough to undo 14 years of silence and erasure and betrayal. But it is something. It is more than anyone else has ever given me. It is the first time in my entire life that a human being has acknowledged, however inadequately, that I was wronged. I do not know why this matters to me. I should be past caring. I should be focused on the death that awaits me, on the darkness that will swallow me, on the oblivion that is the only reward the Imperium offers its broken servants. Instead, I find myself returning to those 2 words over and over again, turning them over in my mind like a child examining a strange shell found on a beach. I'm sorry. Perhaps it matters because it suggests that not everyone is beyond redemption. Perhaps it matters because even a small acknowledgement of injustice is better than the perfect silence I had grown accustomed to. Perhaps it matters simply because I am dying and I need something, anything, to hold on to in the darkness. The guard is changing shifts now. I can hear the new watch taking position outside my door, the rustle of fabric and the click of weapons being checked. Soon the orderlies will come to change my bandages and force nutrient paste down my throat and ensure that I survive long enough to be useful one more time. I should stop writing. I should conserve my strength for whatever comes next. But I find that I have one more thing to say. My name is Marcus Varro. I was born on Keswick Tertius. I served 14 years in the Imperial Guard. I saved lives. I killed enemies. I was loyal to an Imperium that was never loyal to me. I was hated for what I was, not for anything I did. I died in darkness, on a world with no name, fighting for people who would never know I existed. I was a good soldier. Remember me. The data slate's power cell is failing. I can see the warning runes blinking in the corner of the screen, indicating that I have perhaps a few hours of recording time left before the device goes dead. I should use this remaining capacity wisely. I should record tactical observations or useful intelligence, or something that might benefit whatever poor souls inherit my equipment after I'm gone. Instead, I find myself returning to the beginning, to Keswick Tertius and my father, and the moment my life took its irrevocable shape. His name was Aldous Varro. He was a census clerk, 3rd grade, in the Administratum Sub-Bureau that handled birth registrations for the lower hive sectors. When I try to remember his face, I see only fragments, the deep lines around his eyes, the gray in his hair that came too early, the way his hands trembled slightly when he was tired. He smelled of ink and recycled paper, and the cheap stimulants that kept low-level clerks functional through their 18-hour shifts. He was not a brave man. He was not a particularly good man. He had no great ambitions or talents or distinguishing characteristics beyond a modest competence at his assigned tasks. But when his wife died giving birth to a child with horns, he did not do what the law required. He did not report the mutation to the sanitation corps. He did not surrender me to the culling teams. He falsified the records that would have condemned me, and he raised me in secret, and when the secret became too dangerous to maintain, he gave me to the guard with a forged certificate of purity that he had spent 3 years preparing. I never thanked him for this. I never had the chance. The guard took me when I was 14, and 6 months later I received word that my father had died in an industrial accident. The details were vague. A machinery malfunction, they said. A tragic misfortune. Years later, I learned enough about the Imperium to suspect that it was not an accident at all. Someone had discovered what he had done. Someone had decided that a census clerk who falsified birth records was too dangerous to leave alive. They killed him, and they made it look like an accident, and they never bothered to tell me or to punish me for being the reason he broke the law. I was already in the guard by then. I was already useful. Why waste a resource over something as trivial as justice? I think about him more now than I did when I was younger, when I was fighting, when I was struggling to survive. There was no time for memory. Now, strapped to this cot with nothing to do but wait for my wounds to heal or my body to fail, I find him everywhere. I see him in the faces of the orderlies who tend to me with mechanical efficiency. I hear him in the distant drone of the ship's engines, which sounds somehow like the humming he used to do when he worked late at night in the cramped kitchen of our HAB unit. I smell him in the recycled air, which carries the same faint chemical tang that I remember from childhood. He is with me now in a way he never was when he was alive, and I do not know if this is comforting or cruel. I want to believe that he would be proud of me. I want to believe that, if he could see what I became, the soldier I forged myself into through years of suffering and sacrifice, he would think that his crime was worth it. But I know this is a lie I tell myself for comfort. My father did not give me to the guard because he believed I would become a hero. He gave me to the guard because it was the only option left, because the alternative was death, because in the Imperium even the most desperate gamble is better than certainty of destruction. He did not save me for my sake. He saved me because he could not bear to let his child die, even if that child was something wrong, even if that child would spend its entire life being punished for the crime of existing. I understand now why I kept fighting, It was not for the Emperor, it was not for the Imperium, it was not even for the desperate hope of acceptance that I convinced myself was my motivation. I kept fighting because stopping would have meant that my father's sacrifice was worthless. I kept fighting because somewhere in the back of my mind, I believed that if I served well enough and long enough and faithfully enough, I would retroactively justify the crime he committed to save me. I would prove that I was worth the risk. I would prove that I deserved to live. I do not know if I succeeded. I do not know if proving anything to a dead man is even possible, but I know that I tried. For 14 years, through 11 campaigns across 6 war zones, against enemies whose names I have already forgotten, I tried. I gave everything I had to an Imperium that gave me nothing in return, and I did it for the memory of a frightened clerk who loved me enough to break the law. The commissar's name was Hendrik Strauss. I learned this from the orderlies, who gossip amongst themselves when they think I am asleep. He has been commissar of the 47th Kessler Fusiliers for 3 years, assigned after his predecessor died in circumstances that the official records describe as enemy action, but which the gossip suggests was rather more complicated. The men fear him. They say he has executed more soldiers for cowardice and dereliction than any commissar in sector history. They say he once shot a lieutenant for questioning an order. They say he keeps a tally of his kills etched into the grip of his bolt pistol, and that the tally includes not just enemies but the men under his command. I do not hate Commissar Strauss. This surprises me, because by any rational measure he is the architect of my destruction. He was the one who raised his pistol. He was the one who pronounced the charges that we both knew were lies. He was the one who would have pulled the trigger if Donnelly had not intervened with his suggestion of economical mercy. But I cannot bring myself to hate him. He was simply doing his job. He was maintaining order in an institution that would fall apart without brutal discipline. He did not create the system that condemned me. He merely enforced it with the same mechanical precision that characterizes everything the Imperium does. Donnelly is different. Donnelly I could hate if I had the energy left for hatred. Donnelly listened to my confession and used it against me. Donnelly filed the report that recommended my transfer to a penal legion. Donnelly watched me save his men on Calix and Dreth and a dozen other worlds, and he never once spoke up in my defense until it was too late to matter. The intervention on the ship was not kindness. It was not mercy. It was the same calculation that governed every other decision in his career, the expenditure of minimum resources for maximum return. Letting me bleed to death was cheaper than a bolt round. Letting me be shipped to an anonymous death was cleaner than a formal execution. Donnelly did not save my life. Donnelly saved himself the inconvenience of having to justify killing me. I wonder if he will think of me in the years to come. I wonder if he will remember the beastmen who served under his command, who fought beside him, who told him secrets in a moment of delirious trust. I suspect he will not. I suspect I am already fading from his memory, becoming a footnote, an anecdote, a cautionary tale about the dangers of allowing abhumans to serve alongside proper humans. That is what we become in the end. Not people, not individuals. Just examples used to justify the cruelty that would have been inflicted on us regardless. Cole might remember. Cole who apologized. Cole who wept. Cole who stood in silence while the commissar prepared to execute the creature who had saved his life. I do not know what to feel about Cole. He was 19 when I pulled him from that tunnel on Dreth Secundus. He is still young now, no more than 30, with a career ahead of him and a future that does not include association with broken things like me. He made the choice that anyone in his position would make. He chose survival over principle, pragmatism over justice. I cannot blame him for this. I have made the same choice 1,000 times. We all have. It is the only choice the Imperium allows. But he apologized. 2 words whispered in the darkness. I'm sorry, and those 2 words changed something in me that I did not know could still change. They reminded me that not everyone is a monster. They reminded me that even in a system designed to crush every trace of individual conscience, some people still feel the weight of what they have done. Cole is not a good man. He did not stand up for me when it mattered. He will probably spend the rest of his life pretending I never existed. But he apologized, and in that apology there was a glimmer of something that might, in better circumstances, have been decency. I forgive him. I want that recorded. Whatever else is written here, whatever else is remembered about me, I want it known that I forgave the boy who could not speak up for me, not because he deserved forgiveness, not because forgiveness changes anything. I forgive him because carrying resentment requires energy that I no longer have. I forgive him because, in the end, the only thing any of us can control is whether we let our suffering transform us into the same monsters that created it. I will not become a monster. I refuse. That is the one victory they cannot take from me. The orderlies are coming again. I can hear their footsteps in the corridor, the clink of medical instruments, the murmur of conversation about patients who are not me. They will change my bandages. They will check my vital signs. They will note in their records that the Beastman is still alive, still healing, still capable of being useful for a little while longer. Then they will leave, and I will be alone again with this data slate and my fading memories and the darkness that waits for all of us at the end. I am not afraid of death. I have been dying since the moment I was born. Every day of my existence has been a slow march toward this inevitable conclusion, and I have had 14 years to make my peace with it. What I fear is being forgotten. What I fear is vanishing into the same oblivion that has swallowed every other broken thing the Imperium has used and discarded. What I fear is that when I am gone, there will be nothing left to prove that I was ever here at all. That is why I am writing this. Not for justice, not for vindication, not even for the next Marcus Varro, whoever they might be. I am writing this because I need to leave something behind. A mark, a scar, a record that says a thing born wrong was here and it tried to be good and it almost succeeded. The power cell is failing. The warning runes are flashing more urgently now, indicating that I have perhaps an hour of recording time remaining. I should stop. I should conserve power for something more important. But there is nothing more important than this. There is nothing more important than saying, one final time, the words that no one else will say for me. My name is Marcus Varro. I was born on Keswick, Tertius. I served 14 years in the Imperial Guard. I was a good soldier. I was a good soldier. I was good. The screen flickers. The runes blink. The darkness comes. Remember